What if everything we've been told about the Great Pyramid is only part of the story? And what if, buried deep beneath the Giza Plateau, there is something that has remained hidden for thousands of years? Ancient Egyptian texts describe vast underground chambers, mysterious corridors, and even a realm inhabited by beings known as the Living Ones. For centuries, these accounts were dismissed as mythology. But then modern instruments began detecting strange anomalies beneath the pyramids, massive geometric voids, unexplained cavities, and signals that researchers still struggle to explain. Could these discoveries be revealing traces of a forgotten world beneath one of humanity's greatest monuments? Or are we witnessing the collision of ancient legends and modern science? Tonight, we follow the evidence, the inscriptions, and the unanswered questions hidden beneath the sands of Giza. For generations, the Great Pyramid of Giza has been presented as a magnificent tomb built for Pharaoh Khufu. Yet scattered across museums, archives, and archaeological collections are ancient texts that appear to tell a far more complex story. The mystery begins with a limestone artifact known as the inventory stele. Discovered at Giza in the 19th century and preserved in Cairo, this inscription contains references that many researchers believe point to hidden locations beneath the plateau. One phrase in particular has attracted attention: Ra Sheta, often translated as the mouth of the hidden place. At first glance, the phrase may seem symbolic. Ancient Egyptian religion was filled with metaphors and sacred language. However, when examined alongside other surviving texts, a striking pattern begins to emerge. Another source, the Westcar Papyrus, contains references to ancient knowledge and structures connected to the Giza region. Meanwhile, the Coffin texts and the Book of Gates describe journeys through a series of underground chambers arranged in sequence. These passages are often interpreted as spiritual narratives, but some researchers argue that the level of architectural detail is unusually specific. The descriptions mention gateways, corridors, chambers, guardians, measurements, and precise routes of travel. Rather than vague visions of an afterlife, the texts sometimes read more like instructions for navigating a physical environment. The most intriguing detail is consistency. These texts were written centuries apart. Different scribes copied them. Different dynasties preserved them. Yet many of the same locations, chamber names, and structural descriptions continue to appear again and again. Was this simply religious symbolism repeated through tradition? Or were ancient Egyptians preserving memories of something they believed actually existed beneath the plateau? As we move deeper into the evidence, the descriptions become even more detailed and far more difficult to ignore. The deeper one reads into the ancient sources, the more specific the descriptions become. In the Coffin texts, especially in passages connected with Spell 466, the traveler is described as moving through a sequence of 12 gates beneath the earth. Each gate is guarded. Each passage has its own conditions of entry, and each stage appears to lead the traveler farther into a hidden realm below the surface. One detail stands out immediately. The gates are said to be 7 cubits wide. That is roughly 12 feet, or about 3.5 meters. This is not the scale of a narrow crack in the stone or a small ritual shaft. It suggests a passage wide enough for movement, procession, or transportation. The text speaks of polished stone, dark walls, smooth floors, and ceilings that disappear into shadow. Whether read literally or symbolically, the imagery is unusually architectural. It gives the impression of a place built with intention, not a natural cavern formed by accident. Then the Book of Gates adds another layer. Carved across the walls of the tomb of Seti I, this text describes a journey through 12 divisions of the night. Each division has its own chamber, its own name, and its own inhabitants. Some are called the Hidden Ones. Others are linked to great halls, guarded thresholds, and places where ordinary death seems to have no power. But the most provocative detail is the language used for the beings inside. The texts do not always describe them as spirits in the vague sense. In several interpretations, they are referred to as the Living Ones. They are not presented as silent ghosts drifting through a dream. They speak, they respond, they receive offerings. They occupy specific places within the hidden structure. That is what makes the passages so unsettling. A normal myth may describe gods, monsters, and souls. But these texts also describe rules of entry, spoken passwords, repeated responses, and a sequence of movement from one chamber to the next. It reads almost like a ritual map, or perhaps the memory of a real place transformed over centuries into sacred literature. Skeptics would say this is exactly what funerary texts were designed to do: guide the dead through the afterlife. And that may be true, but why do separate traditions preserve such similar layouts? Why do the same chamber concepts appear again and again? Why does the language feel less like a dream and more like a route? The answer may lie not only in the texts, but beneath the stone itself, because thousands of years after these words were carved and copied, modern instruments began detecting spaces under Giza that should not have been there. For centuries, stories of hidden chambers beneath Giza remained confined to ancient texts, legends, and speculation. Then technology entered the picture. In the early 1990s, geologist Thomas Dobecki and researcher John Anthony West participated in surveys around the Great Sphinx using ground-penetrating radar. The technology works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and analyzing the signals that bounce back. Similar methods are used around the world to identify buried structures, cavities, and geological anomalies without excavation. What the survey reportedly detected immediately drew attention. Beneath the area near the Sphinx, researchers identified what appeared to be a subsurface cavity roughly 9 meters below the surface. More importantly, the anomaly displayed characteristics that seemed unusually regular. Instead of the random shapes commonly associated with natural voids, the reflections suggested straight boundaries and geometric patterns. To some observers, that distinction was significant. Natural caves tend to form irregularly. Water erosion follows weaknesses in the rock, creating unpredictable shapes. Geometric symmetry, however, is often associated with construction. While geometry alone cannot prove human activity, it can raise questions that demand further investigation. Those questions were never fully answered. Over the following years, requests for deeper exploration beneath the Sphinx and surrounding areas encountered significant obstacles. Access permits were limited, additional excavation proposals faced repeated delays, and many hoped for follow-up investigations never moved beyond the planning stage. As a result, the anomaly remained exactly that. An anomaly: no chamber was opened, no underground room was entered. No definitive explanation was publicly established. Yet the story did not end there. Advances in geophysical technology during the following decades allowed researchers to examine the plateau using methods far more sophisticated than those available in the early 1990s. Seismic surveys, acoustic analysis, and advanced imaging techniques offered entirely new ways to peer beneath the ancient stone without physically disturbing it. And according to reports that emerged years later, some of those instruments detected something even more intriguing. Not a single cavity, not a small hidden chamber, but what appeared to be multiple large voids buried deep beneath the plateau. If those reports were accurate, then the question was no longer whether empty spaces existed beneath Giza. The question became how large they were, how far they extended, and whether they could somehow be connected to the strange underground world described in texts written thousands of years ago. The gap between legend and technology was beginning to narrow, and the next discoveries would make the mystery even harder to dismiss. If the radar findings of the 1990s raised questions, the investigations conducted decades later made those questions impossible to ignore. By the mid-2010s, advances in seismic imaging and acoustic analysis allowed researchers to examine the Giza Plateau in ways that earlier generations could only imagine. Instead of relying solely on radar reflections, scientists could now study how vibrations traveled through the stone beneath the surface. The principle is surprisingly simple. When sound waves pass through solid rock, they behave differently than when they encounter empty space. Cavities, tunnels, and chambers alter the speed, direction, and intensity of those waves. By measuring those changes, researchers can build a picture of what may exist underground without ever digging a single hole. According to reports associated with surveys conducted around 2014 and 2015, several anomalies were detected beneath portions of the plateau. The reported depths ranged from approximately 15 to 25 meters below the surface. That alone was noteworthy. But what attracted even greater attention was the nature of the anomalies themselves. They were described as large voids displaying regular geometry. In other words, the shapes appeared more organized than what researchers would normally expect from random geological formations. A naturally fractured limestone formation can produce cavities. However, multiple voids exhibiting relatively consistent patterns naturally invite further investigation. Then came another detail. Some summaries connected to these surveys suggested that certain underground locations were associated with unusual low-frequency acoustic activity. The signals reportedly showed patterns that investigators found difficult to classify using conventional geological explanations. To understand why that matters, it helps to know what researchers normally expect to hear underground. Natural processes create noise all the time. Groundwater moves through cracks. Rock expands and contracts as temperatures change. Small shifts occur deep within geological layers. These events generate acoustic signatures that are generally well understood. But a repeating pattern is different. A pattern signal suggests an organized source rather than a purely random process. That does not automatically mean something artificial produced it. Nature is capable of creating complex phenomena. Yet when investigators encounter a signal that does not neatly fit established models, it becomes an anomaly worth studying. And that is where the mystery deepens. Publicly available information provides only fragments of the overall picture. Complete datasets, detailed frequency analyses, and comprehensive interpretations have not been widely discussed in the public domain. As a result, researchers, enthusiasts, and skeptics have all been left examining the same limited pieces of evidence while reaching very different conclusions. Some argue that the anomalies represent nothing more than natural geological features. Others believe they could indicate previously unknown chambers hidden beneath the plateau. And a smaller group suggests that the ancient texts may have preserved memories of structures whose traces still survive underground today. Whatever the truth may be, one fact remains. Modern instruments repeatedly detected features beneath Giza that deserve explanation. And soon another scientific project would reveal a discovery inside the Great Pyramid itself, one so significant that it captured headlines around the world and reignited the debate over what else might still be hidden beyond human reach. For decades, discussions about hidden spaces beneath Giza remained largely confined to ancient texts, disputed reports, and unanswered questions. Then, in 2017, a discovery emerged that even mainstream science could not ignore. An international research initiative known as Scan Pyramids used an advanced technology called muon tomography to examine the interior of the Great Pyramid. Unlike radar or seismic surveys, muon imaging relies on tiny subatomic particles that constantly rain down from space and pass through solid matter. The process works much like a medical X-ray. Dense stone blocks absorb particles differently than empty spaces. By measuring how many particles pass through various sections of the pyramid, researchers can identify hidden voids concealed behind massive layers of stone. The results surprised everyone. Inside the Great Pyramid, researchers detected a previously unknown void located above the Grand Gallery. The hidden space appeared to stretch for at least 30 meters, making it one of the most significant discoveries inside the monument since the 19th century. The finding was published and verified by multiple scientific teams. No speculation, no legends, no ancient prophecies. A real, measurable empty space existed inside one of the most studied structures on Earth. Yet the discovery immediately created a new mystery. What was its purpose? The void appeared too large to dismiss as a minor construction gap. At the same time, no clear function could be identified. It did not match any known chamber. It was not connected to a recognized passageway. And unlike the king's chamber, queen's chamber, or grand gallery, no one had physically entered it. For the first time in centuries, scientists knew a major hidden space existed inside the pyramid, but they could not explain why. Some engineers proposed that it might reduce structural stress. Others suggested it could be a construction feature left behind during the building process. Still others wondered whether the space might conceal additional passages yet to be discovered. The truth remains uncertain. What makes the discovery especially intriguing is its timing. While researchers were discussing large unexplained spaces inside the pyramid, reports from geophysical surveys continued drawing attention to possible anomalies beneath the plateau. One mystery existed above known passageways. Another appeared to exist below the monument itself. Together, they created a fascinating possibility. What if the Great Pyramid is not merely a collection of isolated chambers? What if it forms part of a much larger architectural system, one extending both upward and downward through layers that remain inaccessible? That idea remains highly controversial. There is currently no accepted evidence proving that the void inside the pyramid connects to any structure beneath Giza. Yet the coincidence is difficult to ignore. Scientists discovered a massive hidden space where none was expected. At roughly the same time, underground surveys continued identifying unexplained anomalies below the plateau. One discovery is confirmed. The other remains debated. But together they have transformed the conversation. The question is no longer whether hidden spaces exist. The question is how many remain undiscovered. And if more chambers truly lie beneath the plateau, there is a reason researchers cannot simply dig down and investigate them. The obstacle is not secrecy, it is the enormous weight of the Great Pyramid itself. Whenever discussions about hidden structures beneath the Great Pyramid arise, one question inevitably follows. Why not simply dig down and find out? At first glance, the solution sounds straightforward. Modern technology can drill miles into the earth, tunnel beneath oceans, and construct underground transportation systems beneath major cities. Compared to those achievements, excavating beneath a pyramid might seem relatively simple. The reality is very different. The Great Pyramid is not merely a monument sitting on top of the ground. It is a colossal mass of stone resting directly on the limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau. Every block contributes to a structure that has remained standing for more than 4,000 years. Researchers estimate that the pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. The average block weighs around 2.5 tons. Combined, the structure exerts an astonishing mass of roughly 6 million tons. That weight is distributed across the bedrock below like a giant stone mountain. And that creates a serious engineering challenge. Any attempt to excavate directly beneath the pyramid could potentially alter the way that weight is distributed. Removing material from critical areas might create stress concentrations within the underlying limestone. Even minor changes could introduce fractures, settlement, or instability over time. Engineers often compare the situation to removing support from beneath a standing skyscraper. The structure may not collapse immediately. In fact, nothing visible may happen at first, but tiny shifts can accumulate. Cracks can develop. Weak points can expand. Eventually, irreversible damage may occur to a monument that is considered one of humanity's greatest treasures. This is why modern archaeological investigations around the Great Pyramid are conducted with extraordinary caution. Every proposal must balance scientific curiosity against preservation. The challenge becomes even greater when dealing with unknown spaces. If researchers knew exactly where every cavity, chamber, and tunnel was located, they could design highly targeted investigations. But uncertainty changes everything. Excavating in the wrong place could destroy evidence before it is even documented. As a result, non-invasive technologies have become the preferred approach. Muon tomography, ground-penetrating radar, seismic imaging, acoustic analysis. These methods allow researchers to gather information without physically disturbing the structure above. Yet they also create frustration. The instruments can reveal anomalies. They can suggest hidden spaces. They can identify areas worthy of investigation, but they cannot always tell us exactly what exists inside those spaces. Imagine standing outside a locked vault. You know there is an empty room beyond the door. You know its approximate size. You may even know its shape. But until someone enters, the contents remain unknown. That is essentially the situation researchers face today. The Great Pyramid functions as a giant protective shell, preserving whatever may exist beneath and around it, while simultaneously preventing direct access. Some view this as evidence of deliberate concealment by ancient builders. Others see it as a simple consequence of architecture and geology. Regardless of interpretation, the result is the same. The greatest obstacle separating researchers from answers may not be government restrictions, institutional caution, or academic disagreement. It may be 6 million tons of stone, a silent barrier that has protected its secrets for over 40 centuries. And yet, despite these challenges, the mystery grows even deeper when historians begin tracing reports of missing records, restricted documents, and ancient traditions that speak of knowledge erased from history itself. As mysterious as the underground anomalies may be, an equally fascinating question remains. Why do so many stories connected to hidden structures beneath Giza seem to end with missing records, inaccessible archives, or vanished sources? To be clear, historians generally caution against assuming deliberate conspiracies whenever information is incomplete. Ancient documents are lost all the time. Libraries burn. Wars destroy archives. Political upheavals erase entire chapters of history, yet the story surrounding Giza contains an unusual number of gaps. One example frequently discussed involves early European surveys of Egypt during the 19th century. Explorers, engineers, and scholars documented countless inscriptions, shafts, tunnels, and architectural features throughout the plateau. Many of these records survive, others do not. Over the years, researchers have pointed to references in old catalogs that describe drawings, sketches, and field notes that are difficult to access today. In some cases, the documents may simply remain archived, uncatalogued, or restricted for preservation purposes. In other cases, the original materials appear to have disappeared from public view altogether. Whether these absences are significant or merely administrative remains a matter of debate. But the mystery deepens when we move further back in time. One of the most dramatic episodes in Egyptian history followed the death of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Akhenaten attempted one of the most radical religious transformations the ancient world had ever seen. He challenged the traditional priesthood, elevated the worship of Aten, and disrupted centuries of established religious authority. After his death, a campaign of restoration began. His monuments were dismantled. His inscriptions were defaced. His name was removed from official records. Later rulers worked aggressively to erase his legacy from Egyptian history. For historians, this is not speculation. It is a documented historical fact. What remains uncertain is how much information disappeared during that process. Some alternative researchers have suggested that references to ancient pre-dynastic traditions may have been lost alongside Akhenaten's reforms. Mainstream Egyptology remains skeptical of such claims, but the possibility continues to attract attention because so little survives from the period. Then there is Alexandria. Few places symbolize lost knowledge more powerfully than the ancient Library of Alexandria and the institutions connected to it. Over centuries, wars, political conflicts, and religious turmoil contributed to the destruction of vast collections of texts. Among the materials known to have existed were historical accounts, religious writings, geographical records, and documents whose contents are now impossible to reconstruct. The tragedy is difficult to overstate. Entire works known only through brief references in surviving catalogs vanished forever. Historians know the titles existed. They know authors wrote them. But the actual texts are gone, The result is a historical puzzle filled with missing pieces. Could some of those lost writings have contained traditions about the earliest builders of Egypt? No one knows. Could they have described structures beneath the plateau? Again, no one knows. The documents that might answer those questions no longer exist, and that uncertainty has allowed speculation to flourish. Over the centuries, fragments of surviving records, damaged inscriptions, and incomplete traditions have been woven together into theories that range from plausible to extraordinary. Yet one fact remains undeniable. Humanity's understanding of ancient Egypt is based on only a fraction of the information that once existed. Countless texts have been lost. Countless stories have vanished, and countless questions remain unanswered, which brings us to perhaps the most intriguing part of the entire mystery. Because despite the missing records, despite the damaged inscriptions, and despite thousands of years of uncertainty, modern instruments continue detecting anomalies beneath Giza today, not in ancient legends, not in forgotten manuscripts, but in the present. And when the ancient descriptions are placed beside the modern discoveries, the similarities become impossible to ignore. For most of history, stories of hidden chambers beneath Giza belong to the realm of mythology. Ancient priests wrote about them. Scribes copied descriptions of them. Generations preserved accounts of underground passages, mysterious halls, and places hidden beneath the earth. But there was always a problem. There was no physical evidence, at least, none that could be verified. That is why the discoveries of the last few decades have attracted so much attention. For the first time, modern technology has begun identifying anomalies beneath the same plateau described in texts written thousands of years ago. Whether this connection is meaningful remains the central question. Yet the parallels are difficult to overlook. Ancient sources describe a network of chambers beneath the earth. Modern surveys identify large subsurface voids. Ancient texts refer to sequential passageways and hidden rooms. Advanced imaging technologies continue revealing previously unknown spaces within and around the pyramid complex. Ancient traditions speak of places concealed from ordinary access. Modern engineers explain that direct excavation beneath the pyramid carries enormous risks. The similarities do not prove that the ancient texts were describing actual underground structures. But they do create a fascinating convergence. Consider the sequence. First, ancient writers preserved descriptions of hidden spaces, then centuries passed. Entire civilizations rose and fell. Empires disappeared, languages changed, religions transformed, and yet those descriptions survived. Thousands of years later, scientists developed technologies capable of seeing beneath stone without excavation. When they looked beneath Giza, they discovered that the underground landscape was not as simple as once believed. Unexpected cavities existed, large voids existed, unexplained anomalies existed. The moment those discoveries became public, the old texts suddenly attracted new attention. What if the ancient descriptions were not entirely symbolic? What if some passages preserved distorted memories of real locations? What if generations of scribes continued copying stories rooted in places that had long since become inaccessible? Of course, there are alternative explanations. Human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. When we encounter mysteries, we naturally connect pieces together. It is entirely possible that the similarities are coincidental. Ancient religious symbolism may have nothing whatsoever to do with geological anomalies detected in the modern era. Many archaeologists would argue precisely that. And yet the mystery refuses to disappear, because every new discovery seems to raise additional questions. The hidden void above the Grand Gallery, the reported cavities beneath portions of the plateau, the references scattered across ancient Egyptian literature, the recurring descriptions of chambers, passages, and hidden realms. Each piece alone may be inconclusive. Together, however, they form one of the most compelling mysteries in all of archaeology. Perhaps the underground world described in ancient texts never physically existed. Perhaps the anomalies detected beneath Giza will eventually receive entirely ordinary geological explanations. Or perhaps future technologies will reveal that there is far more beneath the plateau than anyone currently realizes. At this moment, no one can say with certainty. But that uncertainty is exactly what makes the story so powerful. Because the greatest mysteries are not the ones that have been solved. They are the ones that continue challenging everything we think we know. And nowhere is that challenge greater than beneath the shadow of the Great Pyramid itself. For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid has stood as one of humanity's greatest achievements. A monument so massive, so precise, and so mysterious that it continues to challenge our understanding of the ancient world. Ancient texts speak of hidden chambers beneath the earth. Modern technology has revealed unexplained voids within and around the pyramid complex. Between those two realities lies a question that remains unanswered. Are these merely coincidences separated by thousands of years? Or are we only beginning to uncover a much larger story buried beneath the sands of Giza? Perhaps future discoveries will provide definitive answers. Perhaps new technologies will allow researchers to see deeper than ever before. Until then, the mystery remains alive, waiting beneath layers of stone that have protected their secrets for over 4 millennia. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration into one of history's most fascinating mysteries, be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us for more investigations into the forgotten stories, hidden discoveries, and unanswered questions of the ancient world. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop searching for the truth hidden beneath the surface.